Okay, guys, welcome to Process Guy. This is training on Bootstrap. We are want to work on forms for today. On forms, generally, what we do on forms is to style it to give us a more appealing presentation. So, what we did before now was to work with our normal HTML forms, which gave us something that was not really too interesting. So let's quickly have an example of what our normal HTML form will give us. So I will just remove I don't need to remove all the setup from the Bootstrap. So these are our Bootstrap configuration, which we're already used to. So let's go ahead and let's create a normal form and say email. This is how you will create a form for username and password. Input type email, and yeah, that's more like it. And you can do something like this for the password. And you provide input type password. So if you should run this, you should see something like this. So this is what you get when you use your normal HTML, which is not looking, well presentable. Because what Bootstrap allows you to do, it makes your form presentable, and it gives you various options in which you can arrange your forms. So let's go ahead and start implementing Bootstrap requirements. So one of the things that you need to focus on is the fact that in a form you have a label and also the control. The control is where you accept the input. The label in this case is the email we have here, while the control is where you actually interact with to input information. In this case is a text box. So on one of the requirements, is to put this is a label. A label is what showcase what the form is about to do. So we can put a label here, and if you still present this, you still have it this way. And we're wrapping this. We don't want the email to just sit. That's why we're wrapping it around label. And the class that is responsible for doing the label styling is form.label. Very important. You need to know this. Form-label rather. So when you do that, it changes that styling for you, and you have it there. The next thing you need to style is your form input. Your form input needs to have a class title form-control. So when you have it this way, it's looking like what Bootstrap is defined to be. So what we need to do is to create a because it's too close to the edge of the browser. So let's add some filler class for us to make it look standard. So we'll just do a container, put in a container. Use container, and we provide a header, and we just call the header login form. We can create a kind of a ruler. So we have this going for us. So you can see that this one here is looking better than the one we have on the bottom. Notice automatically Bootstrap has helped us with quite a lot of things. It has helped us with the padding, and even the curved edges. It has done that for us compared to what you have by default if you did not have that there. So instead of you styling individually or your control separately, you just implement Bootstrap and it gets to do what you need to do for you. So let's go ahead and style other things that we have there. So let's style the other parts. So the password needs to be in the label. So we'll have it this way. Then what we're introducing to the input control is a class that says form control. We need to introduce the class that says form label. So a recap, only two things we've been able to do. We've just been able to add form label and form control to the label and to the input element. And this is how you define, you build up your style, you build up your form in Bootstrap by working on your way up to other elements or other classes. The two classes we've learned so far is form label and form control. So let's learn the next class. The next class is form text, and this kind of text is they are texts that are smaller, that are attached to each of a control that tells you more about that control. So let's see an example from Bootstrap. So the one that they use here is this, for example. So let's go to the site. Okay, so they have form here, overview. So notice what they have here at the bottom here. So here is more like a helper class or helper text. They call it helper, they call it hints, or to give you more information about what it is the site owner is trying to ask you to input. So this part here also has a class. So, and the name of this class that's responsible for that is form text. So let's kind of create one for ourselves here. Let's create a text that tells the user more about what we intend them to enter in the email section. So let's go ahead. We can put in a div and call it form text. And what we want it to say is enter your, let's say, make sure the email address is correct. So that's it. So we have that small thing, and you can see it's not fully black. You can also put the same thing on the bottom of the password, and this time around you can specify or tell the user that they should make sure that their password is protective or correct or something. It's just a way to add more information to what the user is trying to capture. Make sure, okay, provide a valid password. Okay, that's done. Let's move on to what we have next. Again, you can avoid using the BR. You can have other stuff. So if we remove the BR, there won't be space, it will be too tight. So what you can do is to style this whole thing individually and add it, by using the class that we've learned in the utility. So let's put this inside a specific class so that we can pad it. So all these three can be in a place. So we want to provide a space for this. Note that this one here is this three here that we have here. So we want to provide a space for us so that we can pad. I think we learned something the last time. Margin bottom. Let's do 3 and see if it works. Yeah, it works. So notice it has skipped a spot for us, and this looks better instead of using your break that we've been using so far. So let's continue and see what other things that Bootstrap has to offer us. So apart from 3 things that we've learned now, we've learned label, we've learned the form control, and we've learned form text. So there are different ways in which you can add the form control. So depending on the element you are working with, you need to understand how to implement the Bootstrap class depending on the element. So notice when you are working with checkbox, it's gonna look different. So when you are working with checkbox, it's different. So for checkbox, notice you have let me zoom this in. We have 2 things that are new. In fact, 3 things that are new. So we have check input, we have the check label as opposed to the normal label, and then the whole thing is called form check. So let's do a demo on this so that we can have a good representation of what's going on in our code. So I'm going to put this right at the bottom of this place. And I'm going to remove some classes so that we focus on exactly what it is we are learning. I'm going to be removing the ID. Remove this for so that it's clear what it is that is new in what you are saying. So again, we've just for checkbox, we are introduced to 3 different classes, and these classes have what they do. This is kind of a container to wrap everything inside because you are dealing with a checkbox. So again, you can provide as many checkboxes as you want or based on the need. This is just to address a single issue. Let's check what the output says. This is just to say, check me out or something. It can be anything. It can be list of checkboxes, and you can provide as many checkboxes as you want. One of the great things you will learn in Bootstrap using the documentation is that they have various examples that cover everything you would need. Yeah, they actually covered almost everything that you need. So let's move on. We just finished talking about the form text, and this is the definition and what it does. Where you should use it and where it will work well for you. So this is what I was talking about on the password, trying to talk about what password is all about. You put it at the bottom. You notice it in websites whereby you are trying to fill a form and then there's a smaller text, so instead of you worrying about styling it, it's already taken care of. So you can see how they applied it. They just use form text. So the key thing on Bootstrap is that you have to know what it is you want to do. You have to know the class that is used for most of the things so that you can be able to apply those classes and you go ahead and do what you need to do. Now the next thing is, how do you do this kind of effect? Like, how do you do this kind of level? Because your forms that you are building are dynamic, and you should be able to determine what kind of forms that you want to build when you are building whatever you are building. You should be able to determine that. And one of the things that are new, I love few things that are new. By default, this is how your form goes. By default, this is how you build your form. You just build them like this. And before we go to this solution, this method, I will show you some other things before we show you this so that you don't get confused. So let's move ahead and show you something else that was not shown in the documentation to avoid confusion. So what I want to show you is how to lay out your form in an easy way. Notice we have, I'm going to build another form, and I'm going to call the form contact form, just for us so that we can demonstrate the feature I want to show you. So I'm going to call this contact form. Contact form, because it's going to be containing something. So we need email address. What else do we need? We need phone number, and we need the message. So what I want to do is I want to format it in such a way that the email address will be here, right? And what will be here next will be the phone number or subject of what you want to say. On the right hand side, we can now put a text box that contains the message. So you should have the format planned in your head already. Like, okay, how do I want to build it? You don't just go to the system and start programming. You should have planned that, okay, you have your email, you have your subject, you have your text. So that's the plan I want to do. So as I'm building it, you should follow along with me. I want to put 2 text boxes here, up and down. And on the right hand side, I want to put a text area where I can type what it is I want to send to the owner of the site. So let's go ahead. First of all, I need to make 2 columns, 1 and 1 here. So that's what I want to do first. So let's create 2 columns. So I come to my code. All this thing here, my columns start from here. Let me remove the checkbox first. I'm done with this. So all this guy will come in a column. But of course, a column does not stay on its own. You need to have a row first. So let me do a row. I do a row. Then I do a column. So I do 2 columns. So I put all these guys inside one column, and the rest I make it free. So let's go and see what we have, so that we know if we are doing the right thing or not. Do you see what's going on? So the system has automatically, given us that column left and right, and this way we can now put our text area here. So I won't even change what this one is. Let me just go ahead and put, okay, let me just change it for looking online. So let me say text, and do this one will be subject, or let me say phone number. Phone number, let me remove this one here, and that is that. The next thing is your message that you want to pass. I don't want to put this, I want it to be shorter. Okay, then the other side there, that's where you now have your text area. Text area is a form of input element that allows you to put a lengthy text. This one here allows you to put straightforward text. You can't break it, or this one allows you to break those texts. So even though we've not gotten to text area in Bootstrap, it's there down the code. Let's just jump into it. So as I've said, Bootstrap is robust, that it shows you everything that you want to do. Text area should be under, let me just scroll down to it. I'm not seeing it as an option to pick here. Let me pick from control. Okay, this text area here. Yeah, so this text area, and you can see the usage. The only special thing you need to do is just to say form control. That's the same thing. So you need to know all the requirements for all the controls. So this one is still the same thing as input. It's just by saying form control, and you are good. So of course, don't forget the label. So let's go ahead and implement that in our code. So I just need to say form control as our class. Then our label, if you want it, I will go. Don't forget, you can also do placeholder. We learned that in HTML. So I can say my placeholder can be your feedback. So you can also do this. So you can see that it's having the same style, but of course you can increase the length here with code. So I come here and say rows. All this will length it in HTML. Let's say 6 and see what happens. So this is 6 row. Let's try 5. So that's what you have. So if you don't want to have, comments, you can have this. What's it called again? Yeah. So you can have your label to actually say what you want to say. I'll remove this and have this to say contact information, or rather your feedback here. Your feedback. And that's it. So this is what I mean by layout. So we maintain the normal styling that Bootstrap gave to us, but now we made use of grid to position our form in such a way that it can look good like this. That's what we were able to do. Now let's go to the next thing. I can now show you what's on the next thing now. It will now make sense to you. Now, you knowing that you have the option to do this, you can either decide which you want to do, either to use this or to use what I'm about to show you now. So let's go back to the documentation and start from where we stopped. So we were at forms overview. We've looked at this overview of everything. So here they were talking about how you can put everything in line, like the email address can be inline. So we don't need to demo all this. Excuse me, I'll just show you the parts that are very important. I will highlight the parts that are important. Focus on this. The role, ignore the rest. So the role is important. What the role does is that you want to put all these forms in a row, meaning each of them are in a column, right? Password is in a column, the text box is in a column, and the short text is also in a column. So and the next thing is you need to worry about is the class, and the class that makes this one different is because you've told it that now is a column form, and that's all that you need to do. The rest remain what they are. So this kind of form, I'll show you where it is needed. Let's do an example of this kind of form where it is needed, so you will learn from it. You see the scenario where you can use this kind of formatting. So let's go to our coding and do it's more of like, it's better for like admission or registration, where you need to see all the things that you want to do at the same time. So I'm going to minimize this and comment this out, and let's start something new. Container, and I'm gonna do h1, I say registration. So I have it copied already. I just paste. So I'm going to remove things that are not necessary. Not that they're not necessary, but I just want you to focus on the things that are important in the code and not get disturbed with other code that are not really what I'm teaching you. Okay, I think that's it. So let's recap. We have our, even this one, it's not really necessary, but let me leave it there. So this is the registration. So I'm going to fill the form. Let's provide something that looks like registration information, and you will then see the form, and you now tell me if it's appealing or not. Okay, each of these one now is a form input. Each row is like an individual thing that you can do, and it's starting from here, this row here. So here we are starting with, I can use password as the second thing. The first thing can be your name. So I just duplicated what's on the bottom here. I put it up. So I will just start with the first thing. I can say your full name, and here can be text, and here can be your full surname first, or first name, or last name first. Last name first, and I will say name here. So you have that going. I'm seeing some things not aligning properly. So I'll tell you why those things are not aligning properly. Now this is what happened. It's just in the grid. We're going to fix it now. It's in the grid. What you did to the grid is that you told it auto. So the grid align automatically and pick the best thing to do. So in this kind of form that I want to demo to you, you make sure that there are some things that are fixed. The ones that are not fixed are maybe last things. These parts are always fixed. The label and the input are always fixed. It's the last part that is not fixed. So let's create a kind of spacing on the bottom of each. To create spacing, you do margin bottom. Let's do 3. Let's see what we have. Okay, that's good. So let's create a space and say, let me try 3. Okay, so that's 3. Let me do 2. Okay, so that's 2. So I want to make everything 2. Every first label, I want to make them 2. Okay, so you can see that the form is kind of making sense a little bit. So let's go with the next thing that might come up. Your name, registration form, your name. I can't think of other things now. Okay, date of birth. So let's go with date of birth be next. So I'll come here. I'll just duplicate the first thing we have here. And again, we've not seen dates. So but let's just go with our guts on how dates should look like. Dates of birth. Then here will be dates. When you were born. Okay, so we have that. Now notice again, it's not fully in line coming to what we want to do. So there are ways to enforce this, to make it look like the way you want to do. But what I'm trying to do is to show you that there are different ways you can provide your forms. So you can see that this one is having a personal or different look compared to the login form, where you have your forms at the bottom. So there are scenarios where you have this kind of forms, and this kind of forms are where the forms are much. You have the label on the left, you have the form input at the right. So it's easier to just fill those forms, because the forms are much. You don't want to be putting label on top and the form on the bottom. You want to present it in this format. Now let me see documentation for dates and time, because you should be able to increase this. Yeah, there are ways I can increase it manually, but I don't want to go. I want Bootstrap to do everything for me. And another way for us to increase it is I think I have something in mind, but let me not do it. Let's go through the documentation, so that way we can learn what it is that the system is supposed to allow us to do. So that is the summary of the using grid to align your input. So let's move on to the next thing we have here, and this is disabled forms. We didn't show that in HTML, but there are some times where and the reason is because these features will be needed in JavaScript. When you want to not allow people to do some things on the form. This is not picture, this is actually forms, but you can actually interact with them because they've been flagged as disabled. So Bootstrap also have a way to make it look like that and make it nice. That is the disable features. The rest, these are just other things. Let's go to form controls. All what we have been doing since is overview, and now the documentation is now addressing each and every one of the things that they've put out there. However, most of the things we've already talked about them. We'll just skip them by the time we get there. So we've talked about form label, that's passed. We've talked about form control, that's passed. The next thing that we've not talked about is the size of the form. Do you see this is a specific size? It's general, but it's possible that you want it bigger for some reason, for some mysterious reason. You could use the LG brand. You could use the SM. Remember our SM, MD, LG, XL. I told you that you're going to see it across board everywhere. So it's a very something you should remember. SM, LG, MD, like that. So imagine if you want the form control to be large, just put LG in the front and it should obey that instruction. So let's just play with it. The first one, that's the form. So if you want the control to be large, say if we just put LG here, it's going to be different from the rest, which it is. So you can see it is, for some reason, if you want to achieve that, it's there. And they actually did also for small, if what you are trying to capture is maybe tiny or something, for some reason it's there. Okay, let's move on to other thing we have. Let's go ahead. I want to enable the two forms so that I can test what I want to do in both of them. Let me do that SM again. That SM is not looking the way I think it should look like. Okay. So let me demarcate this one very well. So what I have here is, yes, we've already talked about this, the sizing of the forms. You will rarely be using this sizing of forms. So we've already talked about the disable. You saw it, how to make a form disabled. This is automatically done once you specify disabled attributes of an input form. Again, by the time we start dealing with JavaScript, you're going to see that in forms. Same thing applied to read only. You just get this feature. So it's just to style it. They're just trying to show you the way these things will look like when you're having it showing on your own design. That's what this one is all about. Okay, the next thing here is hover effect, which we've talked about. The hover effect. Now, the next, so what we've been talking about all this while is input. That's the input tag. All these are input tag. All these are input tag. The next tag we go into is the file input, even though it also uses input tag, or is the file input. So it also has its own design, the way it looks like. Let's play around with it and see how it looks like here. So let's say I have it. Where will I put it now? Let me put it underneath everything. And let me say MB3. And let me put a file input here. Input. I just want to show you without Bootstrap, and then we look at it with Bootstrap. So without Bootstrap, you should be very familiar with this. You should be very familiar with this. You should be very familiar with this. This one allows you to pick. So it's a file input. So with Bootstrap, I'm sure it should be form control as well. So this is what you just need to focus about. Just say form control in the class. So most of the form input elements, their class is form control. Most, I say most, is form control. So I just put form control there, and let's see what we have. We have this beautiful styled. You see how clean it is. You don't have to worry about how they did this. Just add the class and then you are good to go. And we saw several variations. So these are other variations that you can have. You know, this is more it's talking about the size anyway. You can see that some are bigger than some, and that's because they specify the LG, SM, and everything. Let me play with the SM and see the results. I'm getting funny result. I don't know why. Let's see. So I said so. I'm getting funny results. So SM is not, the sizing is not working. Okay, maybe because I didn't put it inside. But let's not delve down deep. So I'm getting funny results. And the reason might be that it's either we're not working with the current version of what they have, you know. So let's move on. So colors. This is color picker. I get. This is the first time I'm saying this, color picker. So for some reason, if you're designing an app that requires you to pick a color, they have a color picker tool. I think this is a new HTML tag. This is a new HTML tag. So we're going to look at it now. And in this case, we're not going to use form control. I want to see how it will be rendered by default. So let's see the default rendition. So this is the way it renders by default. Okay. I've not even used this element before. So let's move on. This will fall under advice. Data list. I'm going to skip this one. So data list, well, let's talk about it. Data list is more of like a select option. It allows you to, pick each of the items. We didn't do this in HTML, but it's under advanced HTML. So imagine you have list of states or list of countries. This is how to implement a data list, by the way. You just have it like this, data list, and then you have the option. Remember what we did was select, and data list falls under advanced HTML. So what this one is just trying to tell you that you can also style your data list, and when you try to make use of it, your inputs will drop here. So if you type Chicago, for example, it becomes one of the lists. You can't type something that is not available. If you put something that is not available, it won't give you as an option. So data list allows you to pick through elements there, while in the select box, you can't select, you can't type, you can only select. Data list allows you to type and pick what it is you want to use. Moving on. That is everything that uses form control. There are still other things that use form control, but I don't know why they limit it to this page. So that's what we have on this page. We are still on second page. God help us. Next one we have is select. So this is the select box I was trying to explain. So I call it select box. So here I told you the difference between data list and select is that you can't type, you just pick what you need to pick, and then you are off. And you can see the definition. What makes them different is that one has data list while the other one has select. That is all that makes them different. So depending on what you are trying to achieve will determine the kind of interface you are going to build, for your user. The next thing again here is called form select and not form control. Do you see? And that's the only thing you need to style. Again, ignore these other things that we are seeing there. Just focus. The learning point here is that if you want to style your select, you put form select and you are good. You can also style your label. Of course, label is label everywhere, so it's label, form label. So they don't need to show it here again for us, and that's why they just focus on the select. So we're not going to demo this to save time. The next thing, again, they also implement sizing, like task sizing, and there are various forms of select. There are select that allows you to display all the options that you have. We did this in HTML, and there are some that allows you to select multiple, and that will be all for select. Check boxes and radio. Checks and radios. So I call them checkbox and also radio box. So the one allows you to select multiple options, the other one allows you to select only one option, which is check. And the mode of configuration, we saw it before now. The mode of configuration. So let's play with this because checks are one of the major things that you will use in working. So if you go to the usage, you can see that each of the boxes are separate. Form check 1, form check 2. And I explained to you in HTML the reason what makes this checkbox control this checkbox, okay, that's under radio box, is that they will have the same name. That's how you group them together. When you see radio box, you will understand what I mean. So this one here, everything entirely here is controlled by all this. So the first item, which is this, is the input. The main input is the check that you're seeing there. The label happens to fall on the second part. You repeat the same thing for the second thing, but this time you change the nomenclature so that you have this effect. That's how this is defined. The only class you focus with, 3 classes you have: form check input, form check label. This is like a group to group all the whole thing together, just like a container. So you have form check input, form check label. The same thing we apply to radio box. However, this time it will be the same thing. No change of nomenclature to call it form radio input, so they call it the same name. So that is that, and that's all for form. Range is also not new. It's very popular. You've used it before, but most of the time you'll be using JavaScript to do range, so we'll not really focus on this one. Input group. So this is beyond normal HTML, so I'll focus some energy here. This has gone beyond your normal HTML form, because your normal HTML form does not combine other elements together like what you are seeing here. And I'm sure you've seen this on sites whereby you have a form attached with the label fused together that allows you to say, oh, okay, maybe instead of you typing art, because they know people will always type art for something, they've written it down for them so that they can complete the rest. So this is more like auto completion, or to preempt what you want to say. For example, now maybe they say enter your email address that you would like to use for our website. So instead of you to be specifying at a domain, they just needed you to just do this. So this one has already helped to mitigate issues. So people might still go ahead and be putting more specific, they've already done that for you here. So that's what this kind of input is for. And there are many ways that you will see the usability. So first of all, before you rush into using the new features like this, you need to see the need for it. So once you see that there's a need for it, that's when you need it. Not because it's fancy, but because it solves a need. So you can see that they also use the text, the form text here. So you can use it anyhow, depending on what you want to achieve. And again, you should have seen this in other sites. So you can see this, like maybe they're asking you for money. So this is like putting this is username at. So this is various text. So how do you achieve this? You should know that it will be a little bit complex, a little bit, not too much complex. It's a little bit complex. So there are, first of all, what are the forms that are available, or in what method are they available in? First of all, you have a left label and the right input. Left label, I call this a label, and the right input. Then you have where you have the input and label. So you need to know all these varieties. These varieties allows you to understand how the code works. So then you have the variety of label, input, label. Then you have the variety where you have input, label, input. Then now you even have the one that is attached to a text box, or rather, text area. So let's start looking at it gradually and see. Once you see the simplest one, I'm sure you'll be able to understand all of them. So let's start from the first one, the most simplest one. And this is just it. So again, we're going to copy the code out and only use the most simplest form. So I'm going to replace this one here. We're going to copy only the simplest form so that we're not distracted with all other things that are there. So the ones that we'll be copying, remove the ID. Look at the advantage of span. We didn't bother using div because div by default breaks. So it was span that they used because span, continues, is in line with the nesting. So take note of that. So span is what was used, and then they continue with their form control. We don't need this. Okay, let me leave that in. So the thing that was needed is input group. That's what you're trying to achieve. The input group is a new class on Bootstrap. The next thing is a text, input group text. Like the name of the group, what's the text you're trying to focus on. And the last thing is not new, it's just form control. So the two new things that you're focused on is the group and the group text. So let's see if this works for our code. So yeah, it does work. So that's it at the bottom. So without thinking too much, let's see if this will solve without even looking at the code for solving for the other version. So let me put .com here and see if it will work. So if I do .com like this, so you can see that it works. I can say James. So instead of you typing .com, it has already ended. So it means that they are looking for a .com site. So it means you can move this anyhow, and this should just work. Do you see that? I'm just moving it anyhow, and these things are working. So what that means is that I can go unlimited. Like I can introduce another label here. So do you see? So I can say something like from maybe a date to dash ending. I'm just doing random stuff. So you can do something like this, a label. So what did we introduce? First thing first, grouping. This grouping makes it understand that it's going to group everything, in the same line. And then notice that there is this attached to every one that is binding the forms together. There's the input group text is the one binding all those ones together. And with this, you can create any scenario you want. So you can see that I just created like as many kind of forms I want. So you can achieve any of these things that you want. You can achieve. Okay, that's on grouping. Let's move on. Moving on. We have let me see if that's all. Okay, I think yeah, sizing. So you can read all these up. So these are way simple. So again, very important. You need to first see the need for them. So you're not just doing them for fun, you are doing them for the need of what your application needs to do. So there's also buttons. So you can also look this up. Nothing so special with them. There's even drop down. So because it's possible that you have maybe a domain name, maybe Yahoo now, and then you can say is it .com or .ng you want to pick or something like that. So these are ways to achieve those kind of interfaces that you've seen, in other websites. So all these things that has to do with anything grouping is achievable here. This is where you come and see how those things are achieved. And as I've said, they are very easy to implement. It's just reading through the HTML code. You can see how easy it is that I was able to achieve a complexity of a complex form of grouping. So that's what you have there. Let's go to floating label and see what they are talking about. Floating label, this is used more like in Android phones, or let me not say Android phones, mobile app that we see nowadays, whereby you have the image there. Let me zoom this in so that we can see very well. You have something like this. So instead of for the label to be on top or on the left, it's inside. However, it's not placeholder, because a placeholder will disappear. However, a floating label does not. It just put itself on the top. So I can put my email here and say info@processguy. So this makes sense. You can see looking very neat. So let's implement this in what we have. We know we already have a form. So let's go and implement it in one of the forms that we have. Okay, good. Let's see what I think that is needed. I think it's just only one class that is needed, and it is floating label. However, I think we need to change the position of the label. Before now the label comes before, but I think now the label have to come after. But let's go ahead and change this and test that theory and see if it will work. So the new thing that we're introducing now is form floating. Let's go to the login part. I would like to introduce it here. Let's introduce it here under form contact form. So let's go to contact form. I'm changing this, removing this one. You know that the label is after, but I'll just put it here and see what it does. So it seems not to be floating. However, I want to check something to see documentation. Okay. So we needed to put the placeholder here before this can work based on the documentation, and that's why it's very important that we read this. Is just a piece of code here, and they've also made it available here. But again, I'm removing all the things that's not necessary and adding what we need. So with the placeholder gone, the system is not going to be able to achieve the animation effects that we have. However, it's still going to look cool like this, having a wrapper that serves as a container. But to achieve that animated effect, you have to put a placeholder. I think it has to be defined at some point. It doesn't necessarily need to be anything, but it has to be defined. So you have this effect. So you can implement it on everything here. Let's just implement on these two guys and see on these two guys remaining. So quickly, let's implement it. So we'll come here because I actually like it. It's a very nice effect. Then remember, your label have to come. Okay, it has to be in a class. So very important. That effect has to be in a class. So I'm gonna put this guy in a container. Then once I'm done, I want to put the label last. Remember, it's part of the requirement. The label has to be last. The last requirement is that I need to provide a form, a placeholder container. So let's do the same thing for the text area. So quickly, I'm copying this part, closing the container for the text area, making the label on the second, doing the second element, provide a blank text area, placeholder. Let's give it a try and see what we have. Okay, I think we've messed up something. We've messed up this email. So let's fix the email thing. I think it's an HTML glitch. Let's check. Okay, yeah, we didn't put the floating thing here. So it's not present here. So I couldn't float. Okay, so it looks okay. Yeah, it looks okay. I think I'll be using this more. It looks nice. What do you guys think? Yeah, I like it. Very cool effect. We see it on the phone more often, on the mobile app. When you put it, it shows more often. So it's a very cool effect. Okay, let's move on and round up quickly. Okay, we've gone through this one. What other thing? So in terms of requirements, so let me just play around with required. I won't really talk about. Okay, let's just wait until we get to JavaScript. But however, when you are submitting a form and you make it required, it will do this, this effect for you. It will give this effect for you. That's what it does when you make a field required. But since we're not submitting anything now, those effects will not really pan out to anything. So in fact, they use it in so many things. This is still the floating in a text box. They showed the use in so many other things. So when it's disabled, you can't click to have those effects enabled. So they repeated it you can even see in the input grouped is working. The way they achieve that is just to group only this guy. They still put, you are familiar with this now. They put this one, but they now put the thing that needs to float inside like this. Remember, they put the label to come second to achieve the floating effect. So that's a nice stuff. Okay, this one comes with, okay, that's a nice one. Okay, that's everything we have. Then layout, we talked about layout before. Now that's what I did with grid. When I was able to do form grid, I was able to show you grid effect. So nothing special, you just use your normal grid. You put column, and then you put it, instead of putting label, you can just put them like, so that label will not create a kind of how do I put it now, distance to it. Most of the time, the reason why you create grid is because you want your form to be compact, you want it to be presentable, so you don't just want it scattered all around, you want it to be compact like this. So this is just your normal grid. What did they do special here is just to put the form inside it, and they just say placeholder. That's why it's inside here. So your label is now inside. So you have options on how you want to display your label. You can use the floating label or use this label, any which one you want to do. And this gutter things is a way to create spacing, default spacing in between the label. So that's the G-3. It's just utilities too. So you can see how they arrange this form. Do you see how they arrange this form? You see it inside the code sample. Nothing special. They created is all rows and columns. And that's why I started teaching you guys rows and layout first. Those were the basic, thing to learn when you are doing Bootstrap. It ties into everything. And yeah, everything here is still the same thing with grid. This is just normal forms. Nothing special here. Nothing to look at. So finally, we go to our validation. Validation is going to happen with JavaScript. So we're going to be doing JavaScript here. It's JavaScript, so nothing to, once you try to submit, you see what it did, all these markings that is okay, this is not okay. I think some are JavaScript, some are by default not JavaScript. It just works with CSS. So, but we don't have anything we're submitting for now. It's just to show you design. By the time we start dealing with JavaScript, you'll be able to now worry about trying to submit, documentation, any document or whatever the user has filled. So here is just showing you how you could focus on things that you want to do. So server side or what have you. So my assignments for you. So you have 2 assignments now. So don't let me load so much thing. I will work on receiving your feedback on the last assignment. Thank you for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.